We'd like to give a special thank you to SoCal Brewing Supply for hosting the Society of Barley Engineers. With a wide range of brewing supplies, SoCal Brewing Supply has you covered. Take advantage of their same-day flat rate shipping or local pickup from their Vista, California location. SoCal Brewing Supply can ensure that you have what you need for your next brew day.
So there was we've been sort of talking about beer throughout the year and judging and this and that. And I thought, hey, let's do something interactive. If you were all here last December, we paired food and beer, and it was very interactive, and we had so much fun. I thought I'd mess with you again this year. So, all right. There it is. As a matter of fact, so in the middle of the year, when they were needing judges for like AFC and NHC and things like that, we, as officers, said, gee, do we have that many beer judges in our group? We're not really judge focused, we're more education, so not a lot of people go to competitions to judge, and even when we've tried to do like our sour competition, it's always kind of a scramble to find, and it's always the same 3 or 4 of us. So it'd be nice to share the wealth. And even if you don't want to judge, we're going to, sort of talk about appreciating beer. So it's going to improve your ability to be critical of your own creations. So if, the old, is this good? Now you'll know why it's not as good or is really good, because if you have a better understanding of the beer, it will help your brewing skills. It says so in the fine print somewhere. So we've kind of gone over all of this. So the joys of BJCP judging and stewarding: get exposure to beer styles you may not currently brew. You can share in the camaraderie of the folks who share an appreciation of beer. Make new friends. Gain education, because you people, you need new friends. Goodness sakes. Gain education about beer by participating in competitions and providing an important service to the homebrew community. Speaking of community service. So we have 2 discerning judges here. We have on the left here, that is Nelson Savin. And on the right is Frank Zappa. So, yes, named after hops. They're now 9 months old. Okay, so before, I'm going to go back just for, yes, they are adorable. Chuck, can you come up and talk briefly about competitions and how they work? Please. Well, that's all I'm doing, so it's perfectly okay. Yeah, make it up. It'll be fine.
So competitions are a big deal, especially for other clubs in this city. I think the other club that you all know I'm talking about, they're like way off the charts on competitions. I like the balance of this club. Anyway, so a typical competition is a really, really big deal, and it involves a lot of work, especially if you have a large number of beers that are going to be adjudged. You usually break up the responsibilities. You have a competition organizer who's more or less at the top, and they're sort of calling all the shots on what's going to happen when, and they also are responsible for pulling together all of the final results and being in a position to announce the winners of each of the categories, first, second, and third, or gold, silver, and bronze. But you can't do it without judges. And depending on the number of beers that you have, you may need a lot of judges. We did this last year first round national and second round nationals in San Diego, and second round nationals was huge. More beers than we've ever judged at any one time, and knocked it all out in a day and a half. But we couldn't do it without a whole bunch of judges, and we must have had probably 60 or 70 judges. So the judge coordinator is the one who's responsible for going out and recruiting judges, and there's a large database. BJCP has a database that you can just sort by zip code or whatever, and you can fire out those requests for judges. But you've got to have software then that you can bring together all those responses. and then you've got to determine who's going to judge what. Oftentimes, when you sign up to judge, you will be asked if there are categories that you would prefer not to judge or categories that you would prefer to judge. And then if you have beers in that competition, you can't judge that category. So all of this information is available for the judge coordinator, and generally what we end up doing is once we know all of the beers that are going to be judged and we know who the judges are, we sit down and make judge assignments. And that takes a little while, but it's critical because you've got to ensure that you have judges that are, one, qualified, but more importantly, you don't have people judging the categories that they've entered. And if people have said they don't want to judge a specific category, which I should have, and I didn't, and I ended up with hazy IPAs, and I don't care for them, but as a judge, you kind of have to be able to judge anything, right? So that's a big part of the organization is the judge coordinator. The other thing that's really difficult is you've got to have a cutoff date for when entries can be submitted. So you have two cutoff dates. You have a cutoff date for when you can register your entry, and then you have a cutoff date for when you can drop your entries off. Until that cutoff date occurs, the first one, you don't really know how many beers you're going to be judging, so it's going to make it difficult for you to figure out how many judges you need. The second cutoff date is critical because a lot of times beers that were entered just don't show up. And one of the best ways to prevent that from happening is demand that they make payment when they register. If they don't make payment when they register, then there's no incentive for them to actually submit that entry. So we're better about that now, and I think there's people that literally sign up, pay their money, and then they just, for whatever reason, don't submit the beer. And that happens in competitions that you would not expect it to happen in. For instance, second round nationals, I think there were no-shows, quite a few no-shows. And these are beers that made it through the first round, and they still didn't make it to the second round for whatever reason. So that's tricky. Finding a venue that's capable of supporting judging is another issue. One, it's got to be a place that allows you to pour a beer. Two, it's got to be a place that has a large enough room, and preferably a place that's relatively quiet. And AleSmith doesn't really meet that criteria. But it's one of those things where, where are we going to do it? We used to use St. Dunstan's Church out in the Allied Gardens area, and it was beautiful, but there's no way we could hold a competition there now because it's just not big enough. So anyway, and then you have to have a person that's involved in managing the data, and checking in the score sheets. And then we'll talk about this a little bit later, but for years and years and years, all of the competitions were done with just a simple manual score sheet that you filled out longhand. And then they came up with a different version of that with little sliders that you would fill in bubbles or whatever. And, so for the malt and the hops and so on, you would just move a slider across so that people would see what your impression of that beer was. And now they've gone to an online format called the Beer Awards Program? Yeah. And BAP, everybody calls it BAP, and it's pretty slick. But it still takes time. And you still have to type in your impressions and so on. And it does and I'll talk about this later, but the competition organizer can set a minimum number of words that you put on that page. And it can become very annoying. You get to the end and you're ready to submit, and it says, you haven't put enough words in here. So you got to go back and figure out, well, what else can I write, So you start restating the things that you've already stated with the sliders and all that. But anyway, it works really well. One of the biggest difficulties with running a competition is when you have judges that tend to take more time than they should. I mean, realistically, you should be able to judge a beer in 12 to 15 minutes max. Some people, but as the session progresses and you've had more beers, you tend to slow down, you start talking, and you lose focus, and then the next thing you know, you have the judge coordinators or the competition organizer, going around saying, step it up, we're not going to make it. And then one last thing is that, actually two things. If you have a very large category, one judging panel is not going to get through it. And if you have, say, 30 beers in a category, there's no way that you're going to judge 30 beers. So you have to split that up, and that's what they call split panels. So ideally, you want to have somewhere between 7 and 10 max in a particular flight. So if you had 30 beers, you might have a 4-way split on that panel. And so when you get done, you're going to advance to what they call a mini best of show, the 2 or 3 best that you tasted. What's the likelihood that you may leave a beer behind that could have medaled? It's fairly low if you've got a 4-way split. It's unlikely that one panel's going to get all the good beers and another panel's going to get all the crappy ones. It's just, and generally there aren't that many crappy beers these days. I mean, the quality of homebrew is way up, but there's still those clunkers that you go like, how did this ever get entered? So every category, and there's a lot now because the BJCP, they just keep expanding it. I can remember when IPA was 2. There was English IPA and American IPA. That's it. Now there's a whole bunch of different IPAs. When you get done with everything and you've got a first place winner in every single category, all of those beers go up against each other for the overall best of show. And that is quite a chore because you'll take your higher ranked judges and they'll pour one beer of all of the first place ones for everybody, and it's ridiculous. You see this table with 30 beers on it, and they've got to pick the first, the best, the second best, the third best of that entire round of first place winners. So anyway, that's about all I can. Oh yes, go ahead, Stan.
Can you talk briefly about stewarding?
I don't know how I left that out. That's really, really critical. Stewards are the guys that support the judges, and they bring the beers out. We try to usually have 2 or 3 bottles on the table waiting to be opened. So oftentimes the beer's too cold to be judged, so you want it to warm up a little bit. But the stewards just make it all happen. Without them, we'd be in a world of hurt. And it's a great way to see how a competition runs. So if you've never judged, try stewarding. And you get to taste the beers too. And oftentimes the judges will point out, hey, this is a really good example. See what you think. And other times they'll say, man, this beer is so oxidized, and you want to taste this so you know what oxidation's like, or diacetyl. So stewarding is a really great way to get exposed to judging, and I can tell you that a lot of people started out stewarding, and they've gone on to be very, very good judges.
Thanks, Jack. Yay. All right, he'll be back. All right. So the AHA has come up with a beer judge certification program so that you become educated in all the styles so that you know what you're judging. The BJCP produces the style guidelines. They produce the judging score sheets. They manage the judge examinations. They also manage the competitions. And they oversee beer, mead, and cider judging. Ooh, nice. I like that. How do you why would I become a BJCP judge? Yeah, one of them. By judging beers, you're going to become familiar with the style guidelines and many of the beers in the world that you may not be brewing but would like to taste. There's over 80 beer styles at least. I don't know, it keeps growing every time they put new style guidelines on. It's insane. They produce new style guidelines every few years. The most recent one came out in 2021. And by tasting and evaluating beer, you can learn what to expect from your own brewing, like water chemistry or specific ingredients like malts and yeasts. Okay, how on earth do I become a BJC peer judge? Take an online exam. In the old days, when us people with gray hair were doing this, there was a written exam that was horrendous. Essay questions, it was like, I don't know, it was bad. Nowadays, you can take an online exam. It's 180 questions that you complete in 60 minutes. And the BJC website has study materials for you to take before taking the exam, including style guidelines and sample score sheets and great things like that. So once you pass the online exam, then you're able to sit for a tasting exam. The tasting exam's offered several times a year, and it consists of judging 6 beers. You'll know the category, and they'll give you a score sheet, but you don't get to use the style guidelines when you're judging the beers. So you got to know a lot. Yeah, it's fun. This is what I did during COVID because I had nothing else to do. All right. So there's different rankings in BJCP. Recognized, you get 60 on the tasting exam, certified 70 on the exam, and you get experience points by judging. And it goes up, national is 80 and 20 experience points. Master, 80 on the tasting, 90 on the written. So the recognized and certified, you don't have to take the written exam. If you get to national level, then you have to take the big old gnarly written exam and get up to 40 points for master with experience judging, stewarding, setting up. And Grand Poobah is 80 on the tasting exam, 90 on the written, and 100 points of experience. So, let's see. Lauren? Sorry. This is going to, I warned you this is going, it's so much fun to be married to him. I warned you guys this is going to be hands-on, active participation. So you're all going to get score sheets and a style guideline and a pencil that you can take home. It's a lovely Christmas pencil. And had we been doing this at Rise and Grinds, it would have been a lot easier. But we have provided you with a hard surface upon which to write. So those are going to get passed around as we are stalling here. So we're going to judge a beer together. So when you're judging a beer, just in general, you'll know the style category. For example, an American IPA. You'll know the style and or substyles because God knows there's 14 substyles in every category. While you're judging in a competition, you do get to have the style guidelines. And you're comparing it to the beer to the style guidelines characteristics. So they're very specific, as you will see. You never judge a beer based on your own preferences. So if you get stuck judging something you don't like a hazy, and you're not going to write, God, this sucks. This is really bad. Can I have another beer? Yeah, that was for Chuck. Early in my judging career, I've got one, thanks. For some reason, I got stuck doing herb and vegetable beers, or herb, spice, and vegetable. Yeah, I 3 or 4 competitions to the point that somebody nicknamed me Hoppy Spice. Yeah. And it was like, okay, in that category, it's like, it's Christmas beers and weird stuff, spruce, and you were supposed to mention like what you added in the beer, like, the cloves and this and that. And I can remember there was one beer I judged that it had 5 or 6 different spices. And by the time it tasted like toothpaste. And I was like, what were you thinking? So then you have to politely say, what the hell were you thinking? So anyway, not that those are my favorite beers, but I did judge them frequently. You're going to be paired, when in a competition, you're going to be paired with another judge who's about at your same experience level, maybe above or below. And generally, you do your score sheet on your own, and then afterwards you compare with your co-judge, and you're going to, compare your findings. You need to be within 7 points of each other. So sometimes there's a little negotiation. You can say, well, I get this, and they're going to say, oh, I didn't get that. So, you got to be able to discuss and compromise or defend your position. Okay, and here we have a group of men discussing the nuances of a pastry stout. Yeah, they should be so lucky. Okay, so you all have your score sheets. On the second page on your little cardboard thing is the style guidelines. So you're going to judge a beer based on 5 different criteria: aroma, appearance, flavor, mouthfeel, and overall impression. This is where we pass out the beer. It says so on the notes. Woohoo! It's coming. Our lovely assistant is. Okay. I know. Yeah. Hey, what? Quit. Don't pick on me. All right. Pardon? You'll never know. Okay, so this is the score sheet you have in front of you. And you're going to see, this is a terrible slide. You see aroma, appearance, flavor, mouthfeel, overall impression. So we're going to go through this step by step once everybody gets a beer. Does everybody have a beer? No. Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. I'm supposed to stall now. Yes, darling?
Why is it that you are not allowed to have the style guidelines?
Oh, that's just Todd's asking why you don't get the style guidelines. That's just for the tasting exam. Yeah, no, in competition you get the whole, all the style guidelines. Bless you. Oh, cool. Yeah, Chuck's going to, so Kurt was saying that with the BAP program, the style guidelines self-populate. Yeah, so we're going to talk about the BAP program in a little bit, but we're going to start with the old-fashioned way here. So, all right, so let's look at, okay, you're going to be judging an American Pale Ale, which is category 18B. So let's start with aroma. We don't have to. It'd be nice, but we'll fake it.
Not everybody has beer.
Okay, sorry. Sorry. Really sorry. Okay. Most people have beers? Good. So you're going to smell the beer. You're going to swirl the glass and take a sniff. And you're going to comment on what you, bye Patrick, what you smell. Comment on the malt, hops, esters, and other aromatics. For example, with the malt, is it grainy or biscuity? For hops, dank or grassy? Dark fruit for phenols. So what do you take a couple minutes, swirl it a few times, sniff, and jot down just jot down a couple notes about what you smell. You can swirl the glass again, and do you smell any aromas that shouldn't be there? And then take a look at your guidelines and see if what you're smelling is described in the guidelines. Each section is worth a certain number of points, so aroma is worth 12 points. So on the right-hand side of your score sheet, you'll see there's a slash, like X out of 12. So take a minute or so and think, sniff your beer, write a couple notes, and then give it a score. Yes, ma'am.
Are there any rules on the numbers you use in your scoring? I stewarded, and I will not mention the name, of a certain brewery owner who liked to score in fractions. And then
Oh.
he never added right. And so I had to keep saying,
Don't score
"Fix this."
in fractions. That's just. Yeah, I mean, because these poor stewards are checking your math. And I know. So yeah, please leave Brian out of this. So yeah, please try and use whole numbers, and try and add them up well. The steward's job is to check your math, which I'm very thankful for because my math skills are not that great. How are we doing? All right, we ready to move on to the next? Yes, no? We still sniffing? We good? All right, we're moving on. Appearance. Take a look at that beer. Is it clear? Is it cloudy? Is it appropriate for the style? Is it light or dark? If it's a stout, can you see through it if you hold it up to the light? It's not a stout, but I'm just throwing that out there. Head retention, does it last? Does it have lace or legs? Legs are on the side of the glass. If it's kind of viscous, it'll have kind of a streakiness. Lace is the head retention. What color is the head? Sometimes it's an off-white. And what is the texture? Is it got a lot of, some heads are really rocky and there's a lot of oomph to them. So is it appropriate for the style? Apparently we've moved to the red. And appearance is worth 3 in the score sheet. So don't, sweat this one too much. Does it look okay? It's got a head. Once again, I usually go back to sniffing it at this point. One of the things that I've noticed in competitions, that's always my pet peeve, is the beer comes out really cold and you can't smell or taste anything. So I tried to make sure that this beer wasn't super cold. We're good? Yeah, I know. Came out cold? Took the ice out hours ago. All right. What are you going to do? All right, now it's time to taste if you haven't already. You've moved ahead. Take a sip of the beer, swirl it around in your mouth, and try and describe the flavors coming from the malt, grainy, biscuity, roasty, caramel, coffee, or chocolate. Are there any contributions from the hops? Both flavor and bitterness. Describe the fermentation characteristics. Is it well attenuated? Is it a little dry? Is it slick? Too sweet? Are the flavors balanced? How long is the finish? Is it dry or sweet? Lots of things to think about. And again, are there any off flavors that shouldn't be there? Sometimes beers get entered into categories they shouldn't be. And is what you taste appropriate for the style? So again, you're looking at the style guidelines, yes. Sometimes beers are entered into the wrong category. Say, you're judging an IPA and then suddenly there's a stout on your table and you're going, So, and what, again, is that what you're tasting appropriate according to the style guidelines?
Or you pull Kelsey and put a double IPA and a regular IPA.
Yeah, people get crazy. And then they open breweries and, All right. So flavor is a big one. It's worth 20 points on the score sheet. So there's a lot going into this part of the judging. Yes. No. I underline, I highlight, yeah. He's asking if it's a bad thing to be looking at the style guidelines a lot. No, I really pay attention to every nuance in the style guidelines because it helps me write what my impression is. If they're looking for hop bitterness, they expect you to be able to say, well, there's a moderate amount of hop bitterness on the finish, and you know, especially in the tasting exam, you have to be very descriptive and verbose, and they want you to, well, I was taught that you had to fill out every line. Nowadays with the BAP, it's a lot easier. So, you know, this is becoming almost archaic, but we get to do it together. All right, any questions? We doing okay on flavor? Ready to move on? All right, mouthfeel. This is always a tricky one for me. Take a sip of the beer again, roll it around in your mouth and describe what you feel. Is it dry? Is it a little slick on the tongue? Is there a lot of hot bitterness? Does it kind of taste hot like there's too much alcohol? Does the sensation linger or does it disappear quickly? And you're also looking for the body. Has it got some oomph? Is it carbonation level, or is it kind of flat? Is it warm, creamy, astringent, or dry? And other palate sensations. So take another sip and do the same thing. Do you notice anything different the second time? Sometimes you have an impression and then you take another sip. It's like, oh, well, wait a minute, where did that go?
Or where did that come from?
All right. And mouthfeel is worth 5 points. So not a biggie, but it's kind of semi-important. Okay. Overall impression, my least favorite part, where you have to describe everything. This is where you comment on your overall drinking pleasure associated with the entry. How closely does it match the style guidelines? You're going to give nice suggestions for improvement. You want to be constructive as possible and as positive as you can. So if there's a stellar beer that you're judging, it's like, wow, this is really good. You can write something like, where can I buy this? Do you have any more? This is really good. Or if, you know, your overall impression is worth 10 points. Sometimes you get beers that like should never have been brewed. And there isn't, I don't know if it's an unwritten rule or a written rule, but the minimum, well, actually, let's add up the beer. So the total score, to score a beer, you're going to add up all the points in each section. The maximum point a beer can receive is 50, and if those are pretty darn rare, those are like Kelsey's double IPA. Most beers are going to score between the upper 20s to low 40s. And like I said, if the beer is undrinkable, be kind. The rule is you give them a 13 and you write something really constructive. So, and in your overall impression, you can talk about, you know, if there are flaws that you find, you can write suggestions, you know, things like check your sanitation practices or your yeast health or things like that where you see that there's a problem, but you want to be as constructive as you can because you want people to keep brewing. Okay, how are we doing? Good? Cool. All right. Do you want to know, are you ready to know what the beer is that you just judged? Do we care? Okay. No? Keep going. Just talk amongst yourselves. There's a question. Yes, dear.
Here.
Right.
I just want to add, because this has happened to me before. I think it was a Czech lager I did. Don't ever assume what they actually put in the beer, because I once had someone say, oh, you need to use more European ingredients, and everything was literally a European ingredient in that. And I was very insulted by that.
Yeah,
score sheet.
yeah. And
Well, so that is a very good comment on the overall impression, and any other comments that you're making is do not assume that you know what they did to make this beer.
Right.
Because you may not be correct.
yeah, good points.
Yeah, I was just going to echo that don't, like, when you're providing the input and you say, well, maybe you should cut back on this or maybe you should do more of this. And you know, I think it's more informative if you say, this is what I'm getting. And if you have a particular flavor you would like to see more or less of, I think that's constructive. But if you're like going to tag it down to, well, maybe I think you should check your sanitization.
Well, if it's
or,
yeah.
I mean, don't assume you know why they're getting what they're getting. It's better just to give them the feedback about what you're getting for that. You know, and I one other thing I'd like to point out is just like what I do when I get to the overall impression. When you tell them, you know, this might be a very good beer, this might be an excellent beer, to have that line up with the score sheet on the bottom. So if you see like the scores on the bottom, like where you score this, that if you scored it in the very good range, that you could tell them it's a very good beer, but don't tell them it's an outstanding beer if you scored it as a very good, or don't tell them it's a very good beer if you scored it as an outstanding. You know, just make your verbiage line up with, you know, what they've got here for the number scoring.
Yeah,
I think that's important.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I just echo that. Like once you calculate your score, look at your total, and then look over at the scoring guide and go, "Oh, is that really what it should be?"
Right,
and then you might have to readjust. The point I was going to make though is commercial examples don't always believe those are the best because they have Stone Pale Ale 2.0 on here. That was a terrible beer. The first Stone Pale Ale was a classic, and then they made 2.0, and that was a disaster. I don't even think that beer lasted a year. So don't always believe the commercial examples or necessarily what Gordon Strong chooses or whoever else, you know. Because I think he keeps making different levels of Grandmaster just for himself. So you have to take that for a grain of salt.
Yeah. I have my own opinions of him, but that's for another day. Yeah. So all really good points. So all right. So are we ready to find out what? Apparently we're finding out. We're ready to find out. Okay. Well, all right, I guess let's just jump to this. Ta-da! Yay! Yay! Oxidized? Yeah, I just bought it the other day. Come on. I don't know. It was in a can. Get out. All right. So, well, before we get to that, any questions, any comments on the beer? Did you like it? Now that you know it's Sierra Nevada. Yes, in the back.
Yeah, is it okay if I share what my overall impression was?
Yes, please.
So my guess was that it was either Sierra Nevada Pale Ale or maybe like a Two Hearted or something like that. Yeah, I guess Two Hearted is technically an IPA. I mean, now it's basically like session beer. So, so my thought was very easy drinking, well-balanced pale ale, nice citrus floral hop, bready biscuit, malt character. Overall, very middle of the road. Perhaps a little past its prime. It's missing some vibrancy. Overall, I like it a lot.
Perfect. Anybody else want to share what they wrote?
Todd's got a question.
Todd's good.
I got a lot of chunkies in mine. Is this? Does anybody know? Is this?
What was your? We did that special for you.
Yeah. Is it bottle conditioned or no?
No, it's. Oh. Even in the cans.
Hang on a sec, Andy.
What?
Okay, Sierra Nevada's been doing this for a very long time. And what they found out is their beer keeps better if they add if they have a little bit of yeast there that's there on it. And if you notice, this beer was not brilliantly clear. You know, so they've tried to, like, I don't know how many batches you think they've made of this beer. Probably more than anybody's made of any beer. And so they've got down to a, you know, basically exactly what they're doing for this stuff. And that is one of the things that helped them to keep the beer for a very long time. But I got the feeling like maybe Derek that maybe, so I got a lot of malt flavors to it, maybe a little bit more maltiness than I expected, not as hop forward. And maybe that would tell me that the beer might be a little bit, you know, aged or a little bit older than. Now I didn't say that. I just, what my comments were about getting malt and maybe a little bit more malt than I had expected. And I get the hops there, but it's a little bit muted.
Right.
And so that's what I would say. I'm not telling them the beer is old, and because I don't know that.
Right.
I'm only telling them what I'm tasting.
Yeah.
Ryan, did you have something?
Kurt does, I think. Yeah.
So I think I came down on more on the side of an older beer, and I didn't say old either, but I said that the malt, there was an emphasis on caramel, which tends to indicate a little bit of oxidation or age. And that I thought that I was really surprised at how muted the bitterness was on the finish. You know, the finish was nice and dry. It wasn't overly malty. It still had some malt character, but there was almost no bitterness on the finish. So I was surprised by that. So for me, it was a very good beer, but it didn't make it to a excellent beer, which I would think that a fresh bottle of Sierra Nevada Pale Ale would.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, Todd's got another question. Oh, yeah. Yeah, so Todd's asking, so as far as scores, did anybody give it between 30 and 40? 35 to 40? Yeah, 45? 20s? 41, okay. All right. All really good points. And I think one of the things, you know, with the fact that the hops have dropped out a little bit and it's not as bright and fresh as you might expect. So, you know, the malt's going to overtake when the hops drop out. It becomes maltier. That's when I sort of wonder about the age of this. Yes. Oh, one more. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say, as a judge, I feel like a lot of things in life, if you state your assumptions, you can get away with a lot of things.
Right.
So if you say, like, this beer was too old,
Yeah.
like, that's a statement that might not be true, right? But if you said, you know, malt was emphasized, hops were diminished, this beer was maybe too old and it's lost its vibrancy.
Yeah.
Like, that's a statement that you've backed up with things that you've tasted, right? You're
Right,
not
yeah.
saying, like, it's old.
Yes.
You're saying, I tasted this, I tasted that.
Right.
You know, that's indicative of something that's too old, right? So the person that's being judged gets to learn a little something of, like, the judge tasted this thing.
Right, yeah.
And therefore it led them to think this, right? Because then if you say something like, well, it needs more European ingredients, right? Well, maybe it was 100% European ingredients.
Right.
You've said nothing, but you've enraged
Yeah.
the person taking
Right.
it, right? But if you said, you know, I'm missing the, like, grainy character of European malt, well, even if you say something like more European ingredients would be beneficial, then the brewer then knows, well, okay, maybe the specific malt I used didn't have the character they were looking for, or like
Right.
maybe some other thing in the process went awry and they're missing it, right? So you always want to at least back up
Yeah.
your assertion with some of the things that you've experienced in the beer.
Yeah. Really good point. Louis? Oh.
So I'm curious, if you have the can, what is the canning date?
Yeah, the date is August 9th.
Okay. So it's
So
fresh.
it is a
yeah.
little past its prime.
Oh, no, yeah, you're right. August, September,
August
October,
9th.
November. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I would expect a Sierra Nevada to be fantastic, but, you know, one that's almost 4 months old, it's really good, but it's not stellar. Yes.
So, two things I wanted to mention. Number one, if you are in a bar and you see Sierra Nevada Pale Ale fresh on draft, get it. It is incredible. And it's been around like forever. But another thing I wanted to mention was, since Sierra Nevada Pale Ale has come out, we have all become accustomed to higher hop bitterness and flavor than when Sierra Nevada Pale Ale first came out. And so we may be expecting a higher level than what they currently have. But it's a fantastic beer, fresh on draft. It's really, really good.
So the note I wanted to add is a beer like Sierra Nevada, especially in California, ubiquitous. Every store sells it.
Yeah.
How many stores do you know of that have adequate beer chilling vendor operations, right? So this beer was brewed in August, and it was probably sitting in some warm store for the last 4 months. So there's a big difference between, like let's say a stone beer that is stored cold all the time,
Right.
and is probably a month old at worst, and a Sierra Nevada beer which was stored in room temperature at Trader Joe's for the last 4 months. So
Yeah, and with homebrew competitions, you're not going to see a beer that's been sitting in somebody's garage for 4 months and then they, hopefully, and then they decide to enter it, unless it's a lambic. Yeah. Question in the back. Yeah, and so you're stuck with old stuff. Yeah.
So one thing I want to petition to have added to the score sheet is the number your beer is in the flight.
Oh, that's
because I've submitted like smoked porters and gotten feedback like there's no smoke taste at all. And
That's
I
'cause
think you
they're
guys had
drunk.
my smoked porter, and I know there was a smoke taste to it.
Yeah.
But it's sometimes especially for certain styles, IPA, certain sours, smoked beers.
Yeah, you get palate
It really
fatigue.
matters where you are at in the flight, or it can drastically matter. Where you're
Oh,
at in the flight too.
that's very true. Yeah. Yeah, I have to tell you, years ago, I got paired, I forget with whom, somebody in Quaff, and we were tasting barley wines. And there was only 2 of us, and there was 13 in the flight. So God help the 13th guy, because we were wasted after like the 7th.
Well,
This is really
I don't know.
good. What do you
That
think?
may have been good for the 13th guy.
Well, yeah, but the score sheet, it wasn't legible at that point. Yes, Jim.
I think we need to go up there and present these score sheets to Ken Grossman and take their Supreme beer tour.
Okay. Sure, road trip. Yay. All right. Any other questions, comments? We're good? Cool. All right, Chuck. It's you. He has much more experience with the beer awards program than I, so.
Okay, so.
Oh, Andre's going to come fix, yeah. And here, I don't know that you're going to need.
I'll do it.
I don't know.
Here, you take that.
Yeah.
I will get you all set up. There you go.
Okay, so this is actually a score sheet from a beer that I judged in the second round nationals, and it was a Schwartz beer. And hopefully, if I go up to the top here. Okay, so this was the 8th out of 12 beers that we judged. And so you can see they have a slider scale. So when you go on aroma, you've got malt and hops and fermentation characteristics, and then you just you just click on the line there, and then you can make notes. And in some cases here, you'll see some repetitive comments because it was a word count issue, and you get to the end of the score sheet, and it's like you don't have enough words. You got to go back and add words. So on this one here, obviously it's within the guidelines because you shouldn't have any fruity esters in a lager, a German lager. So then as we go down to so then you have another area where you can make comments, overall comments on that particular area. So on aroma, clean aroma, nice malt character, some hop aroma. Oops, went too far. And then, got to go back down. So this is appearance, and you've got color, and again a sliding scale. So you can go all the way from pale yellow all the way to black. Clarity is brilliant, and again I say excellent clarity, which is kind of redundant. And then you talk about the head, and then the retention. There was good head retention on this one. Then down to flavor. So it's all the same stuff. It's exactly the same stuff that you write, except you do it online. Sorry, what was that?
Does that show up? Does the people when they get their score sheets back, do they get to see
The four. Actually, you know what those numbers are? I'm sorry, those are the scores. So this is 14 out of 20. Yeah. Yeah. So on the flavor here, this one was 14 out of 20. Again, moderate malt, clean, some bready notes. The hops were spicy, some floral hop flavor as well, and then the bitterness was medium low. And on fermentation characteristics, none. It was very clean. The balance is a little bit toward malt and dry finish, which was characteristic for the style. And then on mouthfeel, the body was just a little below medium. Carbonation was moderate, and was not a lot of warming in this beer, which is appropriate for that style. Medium Banfer, and no astringency at all, which is what you would expect. And then under flaws, there were none. So you could identify flaws here if there were any that were present. And then overall, it was in the classic range, relatively flawless. These are the same scores that you have, or the little slider that you have at the very bottom of the score sheet. And then you give the overall feedback. So on this one, it's a nice example of style, well made. And I didn't have to say anything negative about the beer because it was really good. And so the overall score on this one was 38. And I think my judging partner scored it a 39. So we were right in where we needed to be. And that's about how it works. Surprising that you can't get through it as fast as you think, because you still have to spend that time evaluating and typing and moving the slider around. And so you would think that you could just fly through this, but it still takes time. But it's a lot easier than getting a cramp in your hand from writing, right? Yes, yes. So any questions? Yes.
Yeah, more a comment. As a competitor, getting these sliders in my judging notes really helps me see past my blind spots. When I'm drinking my own beers, some of those sliders, I really struggle at being able to tell. For me, bitterness. I don't taste a lot of bitterness, so I can't really fine tune in where are my beers on the bitterness scale. Those sliders are really helpful for that. When I get those judging notes back, those sliders really help me see what other trained judges can tell about all of those different categories.
That's great, and I find them to be very easy to use. Sometimes you have to think about it for a bit, but then you go, okay, where does this beer fall on the bitterness scale? And it's fairly easy to use. So.
Just with regard to intensity, I think that it wasn't mentioned much when we were doing the written sheets, but that's something that's really encouraged on the written score sheets. But of course, a lot of people forget to write intensity. They just make a blanket comment. And in addition, it's sort of hard. It's much harder to pick out than when you have just the slider. It's an isolated thing. It's not telling you anything else except the intensity of whatever that was, whatever the characteristic was. And then that's where the extra words for at least making some comment that qualifies the intensity. What kind of intensity? Was it caramely malt? Was it bready malt? Was it this malt? Was it that malt?
Yeah, this is also sort of a comment because you're talking about the Beer Awards platform, and we use this for the first time for our Lambic competition. And when I got the feedback back from it, it's the best that I've ever seen. And, it was like, oh, this is so helpful. And it may have been because it was Beer Awards platform. It may have been because, because Ryan had it set up and we got and made sure that we got some really good feedback back on them. But it was really good. So I just kind of this is just for everyone to know. This is kind of a new thing. This Beer Awards platform. This hasn't been around forever, and I think it's a move in the right direction.
Yeah, I really like it as a judge. I like it a lot. Does mean that you have to bring a laptop. You can do it on a tablet, but it's a lot easier if you have a laptop where you can type.
So before you continue, Judy, like Andy was saying, we just used this for the competition. Having a lot of judges in the past would bring their own notebooks full of the guidelines, which then get outdated. So, I mean, this software allows you to input in what year of guidelines you're using, what guidelines. It could be BJCP, it could be something else. And it has it all there right on your screen as you're judging. So you're not having to bring extra paper. It's also adding up the score. So you don't have to do any math, which is nice.
Yay.
Therefore, the stewards don't have to check your math.
Yay.
And once you submit your score, it goes to a final page that the organizer sees, and it totals it up and knows, you're done judging, and then allows you to move on. So it's a very good piece of software. I'm sure we're going to continue using it with this club, and I'm sure Quaff is going to continue using it, and even the regional competitions and AHA. So I think this is. Yeah, pro brewing. Kurt says pro brewing competitions are using it too. So yeah, it's a great piece of software. It's relatively easy to set up, and makes judging a much easier these days. Because I don't know, I used to have great handwriting, not anymore.
Cool. Okay. So, can you judge a beer without BJCP certification? Yes, you can. You can participate in some of the competitions, such as our club only, because we're always needing judges. And San Diego International Beer Competition will take anybody. As long as you're somewhat knowledgeable about beer. I have judged with newbies. I have judged with national level. So it is a good way. And like we were talking about earlier, so maybe you're not ready to judge, but you can get involved by stewarding, and that's one way to kind of see what's going on. You get to see what goes on behind and in front of the curtain. You can still taste the beers, like Chuck was mentioning. A lot of judges, especially if it's a really good beer, call the steward over here, taste this. This is really a great example. It's a great way to learn about beer without having to put as much work into it. Any other questions, comments? Do we have fun? A little bit of fun? Yay. Okay, last slide. My thank you to Lauren Withbeard, who did all the editing and formatting and making it look really pretty. And Chuck for helping with the input on the competitions in the BAP. So there you have it. So happy holidays. Yay!
All right, are there any questions for Judy or Chuck?
Yes.
The one in the back.
So one thing I haven't actually seen done in a while, and Kurt used to host them over at his place, was, and thank you for that.
Yeah.
We used to do nights where we would actually go by style by style.
Yeah.
I haven't seen a group post in a while. I don't think Quaff's doing it.
Yeah.
But if there's a group of people who are interested in judging, if you guys can rotate houses. We had a small group, probably 5 to 10 people max. And it was really fun. One person would go, host for that month, go grab, the style, and then kind of just go over the BJCP guidelines. And honestly, it was one of the better experiences trying to judge beers. I still waited forever, and I finally, during COVID, took the test and passed easily. But the written exam or the online exam.
Yeah.
But yeah, for those people interested in it, I would definitely recommend doing like a study group. Try to find other people who would be interested in it.
Yeah, that would be a.
Sounds like a job for a competition czar.
Yeah.
So this is a good lead in. So one of the things I was going to try and spearhead as the new competition czar
Yay.
is that if people are interested, we could get together a study group. I would be happy to do it again. I'm actually 2 points away, I think, from being national, and I've never wanted to take the exam again. So probably I should do it, but I'd be happy. These meetings are really fun. I mean, you pick one of the beer categories, you grab beers from one of the good local liquor stores, and pick out a couple of classic examples and maybe one that's just a random beer that's in that category, and everyone judges some beers, talks about the different beers. There's a little presentation on the category in general. So at the beginning of the year, we'll ask whether people are interested, and we'll talk about how we can get together a group. I think that maybe half a dozen people makes it worthwhile, and we can go from there.
Yay, thank you.
Just a quick comment on that. When back in the ancient days, when Judy and I were looking at trying to be judges, there were study groups that were large study groups who were preparing for a specific test, because this is when you had to do the written exam that was with the tasting all at once. And you had to be able to compare and contrast two different styles that you didn't know what they were going to be without the style guidelines, and it was horrendous. But the point is, you're talking about doing study groups. That was the best part of the whole experience, because we went through every style over the weeks and months that we went to these study groups preparing for the exam. And you learned a lot. I learned a lot about not only the beers and how they should taste, but the history behind each one,
Right.
which is really, really cool.
Right. And just to clarify, there have been lots of generations of exams. Right now we're in the era where you take the online exam to qualify to take the tasting exam. So the tasting exam's really the first exam that gets you to be a BJCP judge. And there are still, QAF still does study groups, or at least QAF members still do study groups for the specific exam. But what I'm talking about is something that's more general, where you just work your way through all the styles in the style guideline, and you can do it on meads, you can do it on ciders, so there's 3 separate certifications. And you don't have to be trying to be certified. You could just go to the group because you want to learn more about beer. And it can be really enjoyable. And you get to drink a lot of different beers that you've never tried before. And that goes back to this thing about, are you open to judge every style? I try my best to be open to judge every style. Sometimes I'm really disappointed when I get the spice, herb, and vegetable beers. But I go ahead and judge them anyhow, because I think it's good to be able to judge those things, even though you don't particularly like them yourself. You still can know what a good one is.
Cool. Thank you, Kurt.
And there are very good beers in that category, but there are also some really difficult ones.
All right. Any other questions for Judy or Chuck? All right. Let's give both of them a big round of applause.